My son said, you know, she was on Johnny Carson's show one time. She came there with a cat on her lap, and she said to you, "Do you want to pet my?" And my son said that you said, "I'd love to if you'd remove that damn cat."
He made America laugh for 30 years, but behind that famous grin, Johnny Carson had a hard line: cross it, and you were gone. Some of the biggest names in entertainment found that out the hard way. They were banned for life from The Tonight Show. No second chances. No apologies accepted. Just a quiet blacklist that turned late-night legends into permanent outsiders. And the reasons? Some were shocking, some were petty, some were downright dangerous. But all of them had one thing in common. They underestimated Johnny Carson. At first, it was just a joke. Johnny looked into the camera and delivered one of his usual zingers. Las Vegas is installing brighter stage lights. Wayne Newton's hair needs photosynthesis. The audience roared. Carson moved on. But Wayne Newton didn't. Behind the scenes, Newton was building a new image, not just as a singer, but as a serious Vegas power player. He had just invested millions into the Aladdin Hotel, and he wasn't in the mood to be the punchline of anyone's monologue, especially not Johnny's. Then came the day Newton walked into the studio, uninvited. Security footage later showed him storming through the corridors of NBC Burbank, shirt open, fists clenched, looking for Carson. He found him. And what happened next became the stuff of studio legend. "These jokes stop now," Newton growled, "or I will kick your ass, Johnny. You understand me?" It wasn't a punch, but it might as well have been. Carson froze, then calmly picked up the phone. Security arrived within minutes. By the end of that day, Wayne Newton was permanently banned from The Tonight Show. No press release, no public feud, just a quiet internal memo. Wayne Newton is prohibited from this facility. Producers erased any mention of him from that night's script. Studio staff were instructed never to schedule him again. Carson, who rarely held grudges, made this one ironclad. "Nobody, absolutely nobody, intimidates me in my own studio," he told a producer. And from that day on, Newton's name was never uttered on Carson's stage again. But not every ban started with a threat. Some were triggered by deception that played out in front of millions. Johnny Carson hated being fooled, especially by someone pretending it was real. So, when Israeli psychic Yuri Geller started gaining fame for supposedly bending spoons with his mind, Carson was immediately suspicious. After all, Carson was a trained magician. He knew every trick in the book, and he could spot a phony a mile away. But instead of calling Geller out directly, Carson set a trap. He called up James Randi, a professional skeptic, and asked for help. Together, they designed a controlled experiment for Geller's Tonight Show appearance in 1973. The items, sealed film canisters, untouched spoons, and envelopes with drawings, were locked away under strict supervision. No assistance, no prep time, no sleight of hand. Geller walked on stage, confident and smiling. But as soon as the test began, something was off. He pressed the envelopes to his forehead, paused, looked confused. "I feel drained," he mumbled. He tried again. Nothing happened. Then the excuses started. "The energy's wrong. You're making me nervous. Maybe the moon is interfering." Carson stayed calm and polite, but the silence was brutal. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Then came the final jab, wrapped in a Carson classic. "Take as much time as you need in the next life." The crowd exploded. Geller's face flushed. He never recovered. After the show, Carson was done. "We exposed him as a fraud," he told his staff. "He'll never be back." Geller's career didn't die. Ironically, the exposure made him more famous. But Johnny didn't care. He updated studio policy. No psychic stunts unless the props come from us. And if you get caught faking it, you're out forever. But while Geller's downfall came from silence, Chevy Chase talked himself right off the guest list. Chevy Chase didn't just step onto The Tonight Show. He strutted. It was 1978. Saturday Night Live had made him a star. His film Foul Play was blowing up at the box office. And Chevy walked into the studio like he already owned it. Carson greeted him with a smile. Chevy smiled back and immediately hijacked the moment. 10 million in 3 days, he bragged. Not bad for a weekend, right? Carson nodded politely. Then Chevy gestured toward the host's desk and added, "You've got quite the comfortable little operation here." The audience chuckled. Carson didn't. Things got worse. When Johnny asked the usual softball, "Tell us about the movie," Chase ignored it completely. He launched into a long, wandering story about running into celebrities at the airport. He cracked jokes about Carson's golf game and even joked he could out-host him. Laughter turned awkward. Carson's smile got tighter by the minute. The backstage crew said the vibe went cold during the commercial break. Chevy kept talking. "If NBC ever needs fresh blood at 11:30, I've got some ideas," he said, half laughing. Carson didn't laugh. After the show, he went straight to his producer. 15 years building this institution, Carson said. And some kid thinks he can replace me? He's done. And just like that, Chevy Chase joined the blacklist. No public announcement, no warning, just a silent, career-altering freeze-out. Years later, when Chase launched his own short-lived late-night show on Fox, reporters asked if Carson had reached out. Chevy's answer? Not a single call. And when that show crashed and burned after 5 weeks, The Tonight Show staff didn't say a word. They didn't have to. But Carson didn't only ban newcomers. Next, he blacklisted a comedy legend who tried turning The Tonight Show into a commercial break. Bob Hope was late-night royalty. He was NBC's golden boy, a guaranteed ratings draw, and a walking endorsement machine. So when he appeared on The Tonight Show, producers rolled out the red carpet. But Carson wasn't impressed by titles. He cared about rhythm, flow, real conversation. And Bob Hope didn't do conversation. He did scripts. Every time he showed up, his team delivered thick packets in advance, pre-written jokes, suggested setups, and even preferred camera angles. Carson, who thrived on improvisation, called it jazz with sheet music. It didn't work. During tapings, Hope stared at cue cards like they were oxygen tanks. Johnny would throw in a spontaneous question. Hope would just pause, glance at his script, and fire off a completely unrelated punchline. The audience laughed, but not because it was funny, because they felt like they were supposed to. The final straw came in 1978. Within 7 minutes, Hope mentioned Texaco, his longtime sponsor, 3 times. "Texaco's getting more screen time than I do," Carson joked. After the show, Johnny laid it out for producers. "He's not doing interviews. He's doing commercials. I'm not a pitchman." NBC didn't want to hear it. Hope brought in millions in ad revenue. But Carson stood firm. Either Bob Hope's prepackaged segments stopped, or Johnny would. The network blinked. Hope was never officially banned, but the bookings stopped. Quietly. Permanently. Hope never got the memo. He just stopped getting calls. And Carson? He never mentioned it again. But while Hope's offense was mechanical, the next guest simply wouldn't stop talking. When Charlton Heston walked onto The Tonight Show, you could feel the weight of his Hollywood legacy. Academy Award winner, voice of Moses, king of epics. But on Johnny's stage, epic wasn't the vibe. Carson liked tight exchanges, quick laughs, clean rhythm. Heston had other ideas. Ask him about a movie injury, and he'd start with stories from his childhood ranching days, detour through Yale drama classes, quote Plutarch. Then, finally, circle back to the broken rib story. 5 minutes later. During one visit, he managed to squeeze in ancient Greek philosophy, the Second Amendment, and a detailed pitch for the NRA Museum, all in response to a question about chariot training. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or leave. Laughter dipped. Carson's questions got shorter. Heston's answers got longer. The breaking point came during a 1987 appearance. A single question about movie violence led to a 15-minute freedom of speech monologue. The house band actually stopped playing between segments. Carson stared into the middle distance, pencil tapping in frustration. "He's running his own show inside mine," Carson told producers afterward, "and it's not entertaining." Heston was banned quietly, like the others. No announcement, just a firm message to staff. No more Charlton. Later, when Heston's publicist tried to book another appearance, The response was simple: not available. Carson respected his talent, but this was late night, not a college lecture, and even screen legends couldn't hold the mic forever. But Heston wasn't the only one who clashed with the pace of late night. Next up was a man too kind, too gentle, and too slow for Carson's world. Fred Rogers didn't insult anyone. He didn't storm the studio or derail the show. He just slowed it to a crawl. The idea sounded perfect on paper. A 5-minute guest spot, maybe a puppet, some gentle wisdom, a wholesome break from the usual celebrity noise. But from the moment Rogers stepped on stage, it was clear. The rhythms of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood did not belong on The Tonight Show. He walked slowly to center stage, stood still, smiled, then softly said, "Thank you very much, friends. I'm very glad to be here." The applause didn't stop, because no one knew if he was done talking. Carson tried to meet him halfway. He lifted his foot and joked, "Fred, I wore my sneakers in your honor." Rogers smiled sweetly and replied, "That's very thoughtful, Johnny. Sneakers can help us feel ready to play." And then, silence. No follow-up. No laugh line. No rhythm. Every question was met with a kind, deliberate answer, followed by a 2-second pause. Every time. Jokes were cut from cue cards mid-show because nothing was landing on schedule. Control room timing fell apart. Segment pacing was a disaster. Carson, who could recover from almost anything, visibly struggled. When the commercial music finally kicked in, he let out an audible sigh loud enough to fog his desk. Behind the scenes, producers stared at the Nielsen meter. It dipped, hard. Viewers started changing the channel midway through the segment. It wasn't Fred's fault. He wasn't rude. He wasn't boring. He was just too good for the format. "Fred Rogers is a saint," Carson told his team later, "but saints don't work at 11:30. There was no anger, no hard feelings, but the decision was final. He would never return, not out of spite, but mercy. For Rogers, for Carson, for the show. But while Fred Rogers brought too much calm, the next guest brought too much chaos, and it all ended with a shattered box and a backstage grudge. Don Rickles was chaos in a suit. His comedy was fast, brutal, and totally unpredictable. No one was safe. Carson, the audience, the crew. He'd roast anyone within reach and grin like he'd just broken a window. But Carson loved him, until Rickles actually broke something. In 1976, while guest hosting The Tonight Show, Rickles picked up Carson's walnut cigarette box, a sentimental gift from a stagehand who had once saved Johnny during a studio fire. Rickles waved it around mid-joke, dropped it, and cracked the lid. The next night, Johnny returned, noticed the damage, and turned it into one of his most iconic on-air moments. Cameras followed him onto the set of CPO Sharkey, where Rickles was filming. "You broke my box," Carson barked, holding up the splintered remains. Rickles cowered playfully. The crowd loved it. NBC played that clip for years. But behind the scenes, Carson took inventory. The broken box wasn't the real problem. It was just the symbol. Rickles ignored timing cues. He blew past commercial breaks. He insulted audience members, including, once, an overweight woman in the front row that sparked a flood of complaint letters. He destroyed props, pushed jokes past the censor line, left producers scrambling every time he was booked. Hilarious, Carson admitted, but radioactive. The final straw came quietly. After that 1985 insult incident, Carson issued the verdict. No more Don. Not on my stage. They remained civil at parties. Smiles. Handshakes. But the Tonight Show door stayed locked. The stagehands even joked about it. No flying ashtrays tonight. No bruised egos. Rickles is banned. Even for the king of insult comedy, There were limits, and Carson had found his. 7 stars, 7 bands. But what these guests did wasn't just offensive. It crossed the one boundary Carson never allowed: control. They weren't banned for one bad joke or an awkward moment. They were banned because they broke Carson's one unspoken rule: respect the show. Wayne Newton tried to intimidate him. Yuri Geller tried to deceive him. Chevy Chase tried to replace him. Bob Hope turned the stage into a sponsor reel. Charlton Heston hijacked the pacing. Fred Rogers unintentionally killed the momentum. And Don Rickles? He shattered more than just a prop. He shattered control. Each of them stepped over a line that wasn't drawn in ink. It was written in instinct. Carson could smile through almost anything, but when someone threatened the show's integrity or his authority as host, the response was absolute. No drama, no headlines, just silence, and a door that never opened again. Because Carson wasn't just hosting, he was curating. And if you didn't respect the rhythm, the audience, or the format, you were gone. Quietly. Permanently. The greatest power in Hollywood wasn't fame, it was access. And Johnny Carson controlled the gate.